Texas Math Mundo audience, we're in store for an incredible treat today. Dr. Richard Tapia, professor at Rice University, will be with us sharing a fascinating perspective. I personally have been a long-time admirer of Dr. Tapia, so I consider this a great honor, and I know he's going to provide such a wonderful perspective. Dr. Richard Tapia, right ahead. Let me take a moment to remind you, if you enjoy this sort of content, please hit the subscription button and the notification bell, smash that like button, and make a comment below. Dr. Richard Tapia, professor at Rice University, right ahead. My name is Saul Cantu, and this is Texas Math Mundo. Texas Math Mundo audience. Today we're in for an extremely great treat. Dr. Richard A. Tapia is in the house. He is a mathematician and professor in the Department of Computational and Applied Mathematics at Rice University in Houston. He is internationally known for his research in computational and mathematical science and is a national leader in education and outreach. Dr. Tapia's current Rice positions are university professor, only the 6th individual for this title in the 100-year history of Rice University, Maxfield Oshman Professor in Engineering, Director of the Center for Excellence and Equity in Education, and Director of the Rice Graduate Education for Minorities and Empowering Leadership Alliance programs. Among his many honors, Dr. Tapia was the first Hispanic elected to the National Academy of Engineering. He's the recipient of the Vannevar Bush Award from the National Science Board. In 2011, President Barack Obama presented the National Medal of Science to Dr. Tapia. The National Medal of Science is the highest award given to a scientist or engineer by the United States government. 2 professional conferences have been named in Dr. Tapia's honor, recognizing his contributions to diversity. Richard Tapia's Celebration of Diversity in Computing Conference and the Blackwell Tapia Conference, whose founders described Dr. Tapia as a seminal figure who inspired a generation of African American, Native American, and Latina students to pursue careers in mathematics. Wow, and that was me trying to keep it short, Dr. Tapia. I was trying to keep it short. You just have such an exhaustive list of accomplishments and well earned. I can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate you being here on the show.
It's my pleasure. So if you live long enough, you win a lot of awards, okay?
And if you work hard enough.
Yeah, and they all fell into place, and I've lived a long time and done a lot of things.
Oh, wow. So, and I've had the pleasure of witnessing several of your talks. And so I really can't wait to pick your brain here. And I think you have so many great perspectives to offer our audience. Let's start off by asking, how are you doing? And how have you been dealing with this pandemic times?
Oh, I haven't had any problems with COVID-19, okay? And neither has anybody in my family, okay? Although my son and my daughter did catch it, but they in the early stages, and that was a long time ago. No, there's a lot of things that I'm dealing with, and one of them is my wife's health. I mean, she's New Rican. She was born in New York. Her parents were in Puerto Rico, and she loved dance. And all her life she danced. She was a ballet dancer, and she had a studio and things. But then she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that was over 40 years ago. And so the multiple sclerosis led to dementia. So right now, in the last 3 months, she's been in Methodist Hospital 3 times. So if I had to say what is it that I really deal with on a daily basis that I struggle with, it's my wife's health and taking care of her, okay? And we've been married 60 years, okay? So
wow.
I was 19 and she was 18. So that issue is the one that stays with me on a daily basis, okay? Yeah. And actually being busy, like I'm writing 2 books. One is a math book. Those are positive things. You say I'm busy and I'm really doing it, but those things help and they keep you. In fact, my internist says that the fact that I'm still working so hard is a positive thing, okay? So in other words, it's going to keep me mentally aware because, I keep thinking and things. And I've been working, I work today in my early 80s, pretty much as hard as I did when I was in my 20s, okay? Maybe even harder, okay? So, but that's okay. Anyway, so life goes on, and, what I say to you is that 1968 was an incredible year in this country. And, that's when Martin Luther King was assassinated, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, we had the Charles Manson murders. And I lived 2020. And they were both, incredibly unusual years, okay? But in the 68, where there were all kinds of things, including the protest of the Vietnamese War, I didn't fear for my life. It wasn't like COVID-19. So 2020 was much harder because, everybody in our house is worried about, contacting the COVID, and now we have the Delta variant. So 2020 was indeed a hard year. I'd say that 2020 was maybe the hardest year of my life, and yet we didn't get sick. We did not get sick, but we had to worry, and we had to do this, and we had to do that. But it's also allowed me to work full-time and finish one of the books that I'm working on. Wow. And that book is called Losing the Precious Few. It's about representation. It's about how universities do things right and wrong, especially wrong with respect to improving the representation of, mostly Latinos and African Americans. Okay, but it's underrepresentation. Yes. And I've actually been working on that book for 4 years. Okay, and it's going to come out in March of 22, and it's my story. It's my story. Scholars go and identify a topic, then they read about it. And then they write about it. That's what scholars do. Yeah. But in my book, I'm not playing scholar. I'm telling you my life. This is my life. This is what I have lived, and this is it. So, like sometimes my son, who's a musician, will ask me about music from the 60s and 50s. And I don't tell him from things that I read about. I tell him from things that I lived. Yeah. I lived that music. I lived the 60s. I lived being a Chicano. I grew up at the time period when Chicano was a big thing in Los Angeles. Yes. So this book that I'm writing about is the story of my life, my encounters, my pushes, and my challenges, okay? And so it's easy to write about it. So like one section is called Made in America, because while I have Mexican parents, my mother and father were both born in Mexico and came here as teenagers, okay? They're Mexicans, and they were extremely proud of it. But I'm not. I was born in the United States with this beautiful heritage, and I'm very proud of that heritage. But I am a product of the United States. Do I fit? Do I not fit? Those are good questions to ask. Sometimes we fit, and sometimes we don't fit so well. But so the title of the introduction of the book is called Made in America. That's who I am.
Dr. Tapia, I must say you're looking very strong. You're looking good. You're looking strong, and I couldn't even tell you're in your 80s. I'm like, really? Really? So you're looking great. I know it must be different. And I want to pursue some of those topics especially as pertains to the issues you deal with in the book. But I do want to ask, when you're not dealing with all the other issues and working hard, how do you have fun nowadays? How are you having fun?
Well, over the years, we've done a lot of things, okay? My first love, as I grew up very young, 10, 11, 12, was a love for cars, okay? So I have a twin brother, Bobby, who died last year. And so our love was cars, okay? Growing up in Los Angeles, we were in the perfect area. And we were into it, at an early age as a hobby, but we stayed pretty heavy into it. So let me say that Bobby, my twin brother, went off and set world record in field dragster. So really? he's a member of the National Hot Rod Association Hall of Fame for drivers. So that was, my mother used to sort of push that the notion of global excellence. In other words, do things across a big board. So you're not good just for the neighborhood or good for the family or good for Los Angeles. You're good across a big board. And I'm saying that in 1968, Bobby, my twin brother, set world record in field dragster.
Wow.
And I said, and I got a Ph.D. in mathematics from UCLA. So those were examples of global excellence that my mother would preach to us, okay? But so I've always had this love for cars, always. And my wife, Jean, we grew up together. She was 15 when I met her. She acquired that love. So, okay, where am I going? Well, up until a few years ago, we had a national champion show car. It was a 1970 Chevelle Malibu SS called Heavy Metal. And we showed it across the country. And so my wife's in a wheelchair. And so Randy Borcherding, the person who built the car, would take it on a trailer. And Jay and I would fly and we would meet him there. So we had a great involvement in national class showing cars. And we showed this 3-time national champion car that I call a Heavy Metal. And I think back at some wonderful moments. For example, the city that is the most knowledgeable for cars, as you would expect, is Detroit. Okay. Yeah. So we went to Detroit, and when I close my eyes right now, I'm pushing Jean in her wheelchair from the hotel to the car show, and it started to snow. Okay. And we just rolled through the snow in her wheelchair, laughing all the way. So it was a great memory. Yeah. The snow wasn't so bad that we had to stop, but yet we were running through the snow. So I have lots and lots of memories of that. And, so cars has always been, it started as my first love, and it's always been a love. And there's two things that I want to say. Right now I have a 78 Datsun 280Z that we show. And it's the cleanest Datsun almost in the world. But Gene and I both enjoy that. I mean, Gene and I, when we debuted the Chevelle in Pomona, California, we debuted it at what's called the Pomona Super Chevy Show. It had 700 cars, mostly from California. And our car won Best of Show. So sometime a while ago, I asked Gene, look, you've danced, you've taught dance, you've lived in New York, you've done many things. What event in your life puts goosebumps on your arms? And she closed her eyes and she said, Pomona, California, October 2005. It's Sunday evening. Everybody's quiet, waiting for the announcer. The sun is setting on the hills, and all of a sudden a booming voice says, Best Show of Car, Richard Tapia, 1970 Chevelle. And Jean says, that brought goosebumps to her arms, okay? And so we won over all these California cars. So what I want to say now is that when I do something like with the cars, I don't want people to say, that's pretty good for a mathematician or for let's say for a university professor. I go back to my mother's teaching and I say, that's good, period. In other words, I want them to look at the car and say, that is one outstanding car and it's really done well, and not qualify it by saying it's done well given that the owner is a mathematician. I just wanted across the board to say that is an outstanding car, and it was, it really was.
Yes.
If people go on and Google Richard Tapia heavy metal, you'll see all kinds of information about that car. And there's one video where I'm interviewed in Detroit by a woman named Amber Getz. And it's a beautiful interview. It's one of my favorites. So anybody wants to look at that, you do.
Yeah.
Richard Tapia heavy metal, and up will come a video of Amber Getz interviewing me.
Yeah.
So we had plenty of involvement, and we went, across the country, from Pomona to Detroit to all kinds of places. So that's always been one of my main hobbies, is anything to do with cars. Okay?
Dr. Tapia, you were already cool. Now you add cars to the mix, and that multiplies your cool factor by at least 10. My students are gonna love that.
Yeah, no, I mean, no. I joke because I grew up in Los Angeles. Okay.
Yes.
And here's a joke: is that the Los Angeles scene, people are so much into cars. Okay, so I would always say this to people: no self-respecting Mexican can be self-respecting unless the car is worth more than the house. Okay? and I say it in joke and in jest, but it's true. If you go to Los Angeles, you'll find a lot of people whose car is about the same value as their house. Okay. At any rate, my wife got into it, and it made her happy. It made me happy. So that's sort of one of the things that we do, and I still stay. But the other thing we did is, my son, as he grew up, he was very good in BMX bicycle racing. You notice that?
Oh, yeah.
And again, we would travel all over the country with his racing. We'd go to Shreveport. We'd go to Florida. So that was another involvement. So that means, as a father, okay, when my son was racing BMX, we would support that. And in fact, I even have yesterday I gave a talk, and basically it's using mathematics to enhance my son's life in BMX. Then my daughter Becky sang with mariachis. Okay, she was a good singer. So we would go across various places supporting that. Then my wife was a dancer, and ever since we got married, so a big part of my life is support my wife in whatever I can, support my daughter in whatever I can, support my son, and get into it and enjoy it. And then my own, for myself, it's involved myself in this car world. Okay, and we've done that up until just a few years back, where I've been working on 2 books, and I tell Jean, my wife, I says, Jean, we don't have time for cars right now. And she says, oh, but I miss it so much. And she does. But it was a time in our life, and now I move on to other things.
Dr. Tapia, I've had the pleasure of witnessing a couple of your talks, and one of the things I really love is how you connect your passion for mathematics with your interest in cars, with your son's BMX experience. And so I've witnessed some talks where you've connected mathematics to these beautiful, wonderful things.
That's right. I mean, I'm a mathematician, and I mean that math is not over on a shelf. Math is a part of me. So whenever I start to think about things or how I'm going to solve a problem, or my math background comes in, and that means that maybe I don't have exactly an equation or not, but just the thought of how you think mathematically, how you logically follow certain trends, that's part of me. I am. And so when we grew up, Bobby, my twin brother, and I, racing cars, I was very good at figuring things out. For example, gear ratios. Yeah. When Richard was racing BMX, again, I was very strong on figuring out what was the optimal gear ratio and various things like that. So it's just, mathematics is a way of thinking. People call it computational thinking. And it's a clean way of thinking. So, you don't think in circles. You think, yeah, this makes sense. This makes sense. Okay. Sometimes you can use some, maybe like in one of the things I did with Richard's bike racing, I actually used, algebra. I used a system of equations and several unknowns to solve some problem. And the students, when I give talks, they always say, I don't see how you bring math into that stuff. And I say, it comes in a natural way. It is a part of me. Okay. And sometimes people say to me, is math what you know best? And I'll say, no, I know 57 Chevys better than math. But I know math pretty well, and I use it. Math is my friend. It's my friend. It helps me and supports me. And so, and mathematicians, like, when I won the National Medal of Science, Michelle Martin of NPR interviewed me, okay? And we had a great talk, and we talked about lots of things. And the biggest compliment at the end was when she said to me, I never would have guessed you were a mathematician. I never would have guessed. You're so interesting, and you answer so many questions, and you have so many things to talk about. She said, to me, the worst people to interview are mathematicians because they don't carry the conversation. They'll just say, yes, no, maybe so. So I'm proud of being a mathematician, and I love it. But I'm also proud that I can do like the discussions and handle interviews with people and talk about things besides just my life as a mathematician. And that's why I started this conversation talking about Jean, my wife, because that's been such a big part of my life. And I share that. And like she was, so when I was in the hospital, when she was in the hospital a couple of months ago at Methodist Hospital here in Houston, the nurses and the doctors told me, you're the most committed and most dedicated husband we've seen in years. And I had to play advocate. I had to say to the nurses, you're doing this, but you're not doing this. And yet, in spite of that, they said, you're the most dedicated. Well, it's something that I have to do because of my commitment to Jean, or my commitment to my son, Richard. Yeah. So I have broad spectrum. This is what I would say. I'm never bored. I am never bored. Okay? There's too many things that are interesting in life. So when people say I'm bored, I'm never bored.
Well, I can tell you're a great conversationalist, a great storyteller. I've been to several of your very engaging talks. I was going to ask you, Dr. Tapia, when did you realize you had a talent for mathematics?
It started right away. When I was in the first grade, I was always the best. I went to some pretty crummy high schools in Los Angeles. I mean, they were not really good schools at all because we lived in parts of town that were not the parts where the good schools were. But ever since the first grade.
All right, we had a little internet issue, but we're back at it. I think we left off with when did you first realize you had a talent in mathematics?
Yeah, and the answer is that I was always good in math, and it started it was showed in the first grade all the way to the 12th grade. And so I was always the best in school in math, okay? Now, look, I was a big fish in a crummy pond. The schools that I went to were not real good. In fact, they were kind of bad. But I was still a big fish. And being a big fish in a little pond gives you a lot of confidence, okay? So I had confidence that when I went to junior college, I had excellent instruction in calculus and things, and I continued to be the best. Now, when I got to UCLA, I was no longer the best because UCLA was full of really good people, but I was good enough, and I knew that I wasn't going to be the best, but I was good enough. And so I wrote it through, and I did well, and I just said, I'm going to work hard. In high school, I never worked hard, but I started to work really hard at UCLA, and then I went to graduate school, and I took a few classes, but worked really hard in graduate school. And so I did well. In other words, I didn't know, and I don't think anybody knew that I would be competitive at a place like UCLA or that. But I was, okay? And very few people from my high school went to college. But, and then from UCLA, I went to University of Wisconsin, it's called the Math Research Center there, which is one of the top units in the world. And so, that really helped because I was running with the big dogs, okay? Not only was I running with the big dogs, they took me in as a big dog. They said, they didn't question it. When President Clinton appointed me to the National Science Board, and that's the governing body of the National Science Foundation. When I got there, these people were so great and so wonderful. They didn't vibe you. They didn't try to question were you good enough. They just said, okay, you're here, let's go. So when I was at the Math Research Center in Wisconsin, they said, okay, you're here, so let's go and let's do some good mathematics. And so a big part of my life has been to gain confidence by running with really big dogs. And I think that's helped me a lot. Confidence is really everything. And so I took my talent, which I didn't know how good it was, but then I started running with big dogs, and I saw that maybe it was better than I thought it was. Okay, so I love mathematics, and I'm confident in mathematics. I do believe that I belong. Okay?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's right. A lot of it is confidence. So I got a question. Who inspired you and who shaped your value system?
My mother did. My mother, the wonderful woman that she was, she came from Mexico at the age of 12, and she came by herself with her 11-year-old sister. And so she never went to middle school, and she never went to high school. But she would read a lot, and she really had an incredible value on education. And so in my family, my mother never went to middle school. She never went to high school. She read a lot, but she made us feel that education was of great value, and just one step forward would take you someplace great. So if you go down the rainbow path, at the end there would be a pot of gold. That's the way she made us feel. Okay? And so I have a sister who went to Stanford. I went to UCLA. I have a brother that went to UCLA, and my youngest brother went to Yale. Okay, wow. So she motivated us. Okay, so Stanford, Yale, UCLA, and she told us. That goes back to my statement about global excellence. She made us feel that we should be in good places trying to do good things, and we did. So while she knew no mathematics, and while she was not formally educated, she gave us the basic feeling that sí se puede. My mother did sí se puede before Cesar Chavez did. Okay, wow. And she didn't say it in words. She just said, sure. Look, you can, and we all can. And she made us believe in ourselves. And I think that was a key thing. She made us believe not only that we could, but we belonged. Okay, and that's it. So the formal math stuff, you pick that up on your own. It's just this feeling. So just think of what is it, what Simone Biles is dealing with right now at the Olympics is not her talent. It's not her talent. It's her head, and how to get the head together, that all these things put body and head together. So I had to feel all these places as I grew up, because see, I grew up as Mexican American, and so people would always tell me, you don't belong. You don't are the kind of person that shouldn't be here. So I never had teachers tell me I was great. I never had counselors tell me I was great. I just had to believe in myself from what I learned from my mother. Okay, but I had to put together. There's been many times where it's been very challenging where I said, do I belong? At the National Science Board, okay, do I belong? Do I belong? At Rice University. And I would tell myself, like I would tell the president of Rice University, David Lebron, he and I get along. Right? He said to me, Rice has been good to you, okay? And I say, yes, it has. But I've been better to Rice because I bring in my understanding of diversity, of growing up, in the barrios, of doing a lot of things. So I bring to Rice an understanding that Rice really needs. Okay, so yes, Rice has been good to me, but I've been better to Rice than Rice has been to me, and I really feel that. So in that sense, my mother taught us that, and also in that sense, as we grew up, we weren't this extremely humble Mexican people that would just say, yes sir, or to everything. We carried ourselves with confidence, and we carried ourselves with belonging, and that's important. And I think that goes back now to when I was talking about Simone Biles. She's got to put together the whole package, and I had to put together the whole package. And then a point came into my life where I said, yeah, I belong. Okay, even though there are people saying maybe I don't. But for example, I won the National Medal of Science. Okay, that's the highest honor given by the United States government. Okay, and after I won that, see, in mathematics, you don't have a Nobel Prize. You have a Fields Medal, but you have to be under the age of 40 for a Fields Medal. So that means if you're a mathematician in your 50s and 60s, the biggest prize given in the United States is the National Medal of Science. So for mathematicians, the National Medal of Science is a big prize. So I had a lot of feeling when I, was nominated for it and when I won it. But do I belong and how did I do it? So I had to deal with those things, put them together, and I did. But when I first won it, I remember giving a talk at the University of Washington, and a very famous mathematician came up to me, and he said, "Richard, I see you won the National Medal of Science." And I said, "Yes." And he'd say, "Well, I thought you were okay or pretty good, but I didn't think you were that good." Okay. And then I said to him, "Well, I'm not going to give it back, so I'm going to stay with it." Okay. And so I had a deal internally that yes, I belong, and yes, I deserve this. Okay. And
Dr. Tapia, you must have made your mom so proud. She must have been so proud.
Yeah, she was, and yeah, she was, and my brothers and sisters, they did well too. So yeah, my mother, in fact, when I won the National Medal of Science, my mother was no longer alive. But that night, I closed my eyes, and I said, "Thank you, Mother, for teaching us global excellence. This is a product of your teaching." Okay.
Yes.
And my wife is New Yorker, as I said earlier, and so Jean grew up in New York, and she was in a wheelchair. So at the White House, she was in the front row in the wheelchair, and a woman came out and said, "President Obama doesn't like you to yell, so don't yell." And okay, and so if you grow up in this country, you're sitting there and they go, "Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States," and they play "Hail to the Chief." It's got to do something to you. Okay, so Jean was in the front row, and she started yelling. No, when they read my name, when the Marine Sergeant read my name, Jean just started yelling, and she said, yeah. And President Obama looked at me, and I said, "Yes, that's my wife." Okay, and he didn't say anything; he just acknowledged it. And then I said to her, "Now she's New York Puerto Rican, so they're all loud, so you can expect her to be loud." And he just smiled. And then that night, Jean told me, "You knew I was going to yell. My side won. My side won. I had to yell." And I said, "Yeah, Jean, I knew you were going to yell." But it was a great moment. So, being at the White House, receiving the award from President Obama was a great moment for all of us. Now, my mother didn't see that because she had already died, but I did think of her at the time.
So awesome. I can only imagine how that felt. Dr. Tapia, I do want to get into some of the social issues, because you didn't rest in your laurels. Yes, you reached the highest levels. You're a university professor at a prestigious university, but you used your position, you leveraged your position to make an impact on society, to promote diversity. So can you define the issues that we face when promoting diversity?
Sure. Okay. In the 60s, because I grew up in the 60s, we tried to integrate. Okay, so desegregate, if you wish, and schools were doing that, and everything was good. But recently, we've gone back to segregation. So if you look at the high schools in Houston, Texas, you'll see that there are a lot of schools that are 100% minority. Okay, so this, on the west side, they're kind of integrated. Other parts are not. So we have to deal with promoting these underrepresented minority students. So when I say underrepresented, I really mean domestic-born Latinos and domestic-born African Americans. Okay, and so I often say that our number one enemy in promoting underrepresentation is poor preparation at all levels. Poor coming out of high school not being prepared, and I see that with Rice students all the time. So I saw that I could help just by, one, being a role model, two, getting them to believe in themselves, and three, giving them opportunities to establish confidence. Okay, so high school. So the preparations in our high schools needs to be more uniform, and it's too separated. You look into the big cities, and I talk about Houston. There's too much difference depending on what high school you went to. Okay, and I noticed last night on TV, I heard somebody talk that success in college is not correlated as much to parents' education as much as it is to parents' income. Okay, parents' income. So if you're poor and your parents are not educated, it's hard to appreciate. Now, my mother was unusual. She did get us to appreciate the value of education. But how many students do their families say, I have women students, Ph.D. students, that say the mother and father just want them to get married and go on and live a life and not appreciate the value of getting a Ph.D. in mathematics, okay, and go like that. So, role model issue, okay, and then deal with the preparation. Deal with the fact that students are not prepared, and then deal and instill passion. You have to want it. You have to really want it. You can't do something if you're not passionate about it. I love mathematics, and sometimes when I prove a theorem, I look at it, and it's enough just to say, that's going to make me happy for the day. Okay, it's good. So, getting our students to believe that they belong, that they can, and that they have poor preparation. A lot of times I'll get students come to Rice, and they don't know that they don't have, they're not as well prepared as other students, and their teachers don't know. Okay, so they come in, and they're not used to asking for help. So you have to say, look, it's okay to ask for help, and I'm going to help you. And that's what I saw. So when I started teaching at Rice, I was the first minority faculty. I saw these students need help, and I can help. Okay, and that's what I've done. So I have an incredible record of producing women and minority PhDs. An incredible record. Nobody in the country can match it.
Wow.
But it was just by being sensitive to their needs, directing them, and having them listen to me. In other words, someone like them was telling them what it was like. Okay? So there's credibility. I mean, if they look at me, and I have lived so much life that no one can tell me, oh, you don't understand my situation. Unfortunately, I understand too many situations. I've lived too much of life. I had, my wife has multiple sclerosis. She has myasthenia gravis. She has essentially dementia. It's hard. But some years back, our daughter, who was 21, was killed in an automobile accident. And she was a student at Rice. She was a sophomore at Rice. And she had just come back from dancing in New York. So I've lived too much life, but so I don't put it on my sleeve and I don't put it forward. But I've been there. You talk about where you're going to go or where you've been. I've been there too.
Well, absolutely, Dr. Tapia. I must say this. I've been a public school teacher, and I'll be entering my 23rd year in the Houston area. You're the guy I can point to. You're the guy that I can point to. See, it can be done. It can be done. Look at this guy. It can be done. So you have served as an inspiration to my students for the model that you represent. Back in our day, in my day, Stand and Deliver, the movie came out. It was so inspirational. But you're what happens, when people succeed and reach the higher academic area. And I just got to tell you, you've been the guy I can point to as an inspiration for all my students all these years.
I like to hear that. And I want to do that. I want to be that. I want to be that role model that says, yeah, feasibility, you can do it. And I've been at the highest level. People always try to discredit me. They say, oh, do you have a PhD? And I go, yeah. And I mean, do you have tenure? Yeah. Do you have this? Eventually, and then finally they end up saying, well, you're the exception. You're an exception. Okay. But look, but this sword has two edges. And here's what I want to say. One edge is I want to be a role model for our youth, okay, and for our community. That's it. But the second, on the other edge, is I want to show the community, the majority community. So when I was in the National Science Board, I was the only minority. But I want to show the majority people that excellence comes in all flavors. Here is Richard Tapia, who happens to be brown, and he's giving us excellence. So I want to be an example to our youth, an example to majority society. Excellence comes in brown flavors also.
Absolutely, Dr. Tapia, absolutely. And I tell you, I've pointed to you many times in my classroom. It can be done. It can be done, and this is the proof. You know, I was going to ask you, how severe is the lack of diversity in math faculties throughout our top tier universities?
Oh, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. See, math is the worst. Okay, so historically has been the worst, and mathematicians are we're an elite group. There's no doubt about it. Okay, and we're very discriminating. Okay, now I don't think that mathematicians are racist in the sense that they would look at somebody who's black or brown and say, okay, you can't, but they also don't support these people. So it's not that there's overt racism. It's just an implied lower expectation. So we talked earlier about confidence, but lower expectations. So if you take a student and you as a teacher, so if the parent or the student or the teacher has lower expectation for that person, it's going to really hurt. So you have to have high expectation. And mathematicians don't have high expectation for minority students. Okay, so math is the worst, then physics, then chemistry, and then put in computer science, and that's it. So if you look at the numbers, for example, of minority, let's say underrepresented minority, that's black or brown, born in this country, faculty, and let's take our tier 1 universities. I think that like University of Texas has no African American domestic born. A&M has none. U of H has none. Okay, we have one in our department, and so the numbers of minority faculty at tier 1 universities is either 0 or 1. Okay, 0 or 1. And I often ask students, and what do you think is the percentage of minority faculty? And they'll go 30%. And I go, 0 or 1. Okay. So if you look at Stanford, if you looked at Berkeley, if you looked at UCLA, they have no African American domestic born faculty. Now, each one of them may have one Latino. Okay. Like UCLA has Joey Turan. And Stanford has none. Berkeley has none. So I joke when I say this, but it's usually 0. And when they get 1, this is a mathematical joke. Going from 0 to 1 is infinite improvement. Okay? and a lot of times what they will say is, implicitly they will say, okay, we have ours, we have our 1. Now you go get yours and stop. But that's not the way that people feel in women. I mean, you don't say we have 1 woman on our faculty and that's enough. I just gave a talk at Yale in computer science, and 50% of the faculty in computer science at Yale were women. 50%. No black, no brown. Okay, domestic. Okay, so we have learned to improve women, and I say that's great, and I'm for it because I've done a lot of it. But nobody stops and say, oh yeah, we have 1. They want parity. They want 50%, and we're moving toward that way. But people don't feel that way about improving representation. It's for them, it's not an issue that they're as comfortable with or as familiar with.
Thanks for this message, because I'm hoping I think I have a lot of youth that come across this channel, and I'm hoping these words spoken by you is going to light a fire in them. It's going to inspire them to really work hard and dig deep to try to succeed and follow your path,
Yeah, and I do too. I too hope that, okay? I too. Sometimes, I tell a student at Rice, you're good, okay? Let's say a minority student. If you consider graduate school, and they'll say, oh no, I never thought about that. I'm not good enough, okay? And I'll say, no, you are good enough. You have to think about it. And just that one statement from one professor will make a difference, okay?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you talk about lack of high expectation. It's throughout the system, in high schools too. And you said something once that I heard and it really resonated with me. You said you got to distinguish between a lack of talent versus a lack of preparation.
That's right.
Our kids got the ability.
That's really important. That's a big important issue. And math professors tend not to do that, okay? Distinguish between lack of talent and lack of preparation. Absolutely. When I got to UCLA, I was definitely had a lack of preparation coming from a crummy high school and junior college. But I knew it. I saw, and But see, here's what's important. I didn't doubt my talent. I just said I'm not as well prepared. Okay, and I tried hard to do well in certain classes so that I could keep the confidence. But I didn't really, as an undergraduate, even though I came from crummy background, I believed in myself. Maybe because of my mother. I can. Sí se puede.
Absolutely. So I was going to ask you, can you share a couple of success stories? Are there any youths in your mind right now that you'd be able to share with the audience?
Success stories for what? For me?
Some kids that went on to get their Ph.D. or that you knew that they worked hard, that you made an impact.
Yeah, I have many. I mean, let's take Juan Mesa, who was one of my students at Rice. He went to Milby High School in Houston. He was born in Houston, Mexican American.
Juan Mesa.
And he became dean of natural sciences at the University of California, Merced, and now he is at the National Science Foundation as director of mathematical sciences. Okay.
Wow, what an incredible story.
And then, I have Cristina Villalobos at University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Joseph Cifuentes, okay, University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Okay? And so at ExxonMobil, we have Cassandra McZeal, and she's African American, and she was one of my students. So I just go on and on and on giving you examples. That's one of the reasons that I win these awards, is because I've produced, in the sense I've guided so many minority students and women, okay, that are now faculty positions or high-level positions in industry. And so I'm very proud of that record. And in fact, you brought a good point. What I expect my legacy to be, I want my legacy to carry through the students that I touch. When I was young and naive, I thought I could change my colleagues, okay? Or maybe the admission. But I saw that that's not going to happen. My legacy will live through the students that I've impacted.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. What a legacy to have. What a legacy to have. And it's alive and well today and strong. So, what advice do you have for any of the youth to come across this interview? What would you like to tell them?
To believe in themselves, and if they want it enough, they can do it. If they want it, they can do it. And don't let one teacher discourage them, or one person, okay? Don't. I've had plenty of discouragement from people, and if you want it, just think about what it takes to succeed. My mother taught us survival skills also. Here's what it takes to succeed. So when I was at Rice up for tenure, I figured out what are they looking for, okay? And I'm going to give them what they're looking for. And I did. And so I was promoted in record time, because I said, this is what they want, and this is what they want, and this is what I'm going to give them, okay? Yeah. And I did. So I say, believe in yourself and do things like, for example, don't take too many classes. Do very well in one class. Look for professors that will be your support. Okay, you will always need letters of recommendation. So get professors who will write you good letters. And another thing that I say to underrepresented minority students who have done well in their minority high school is, don't be afraid to ask for help. When you go to your place, professors want to help. People do want to help, but you have to ask for it, okay? Usually they don't come out. Now, I'll go out and look at a student and say, I can help you. But yeah, believe in yourself. As needed, ask for help. At Rice, if I leave the students alone, by the time that they come to ask for help, it's too late. I mean, I need to go out and be proactive in trying to search for them.
Great point. Great point. Wow. Wonderful message. Wonderful advice. I love it. I love it. So, what an incredible life you live. What an incredible life you've had. What does the future hold for Dr. Tapia?
Oh, I just want to finish my 2 books. And, I've lived a full life, and I'm teaching 2 classes. And I have these 2 books. I have a math book, and I have this Losing the Precious Few. So what I want to do is, when I was young, maybe I would dream about being something, president or something. But right now, I just want to finish my 2 books and say that makes a life complete. Okay, that's what I want to do.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, Dr. Tapia, do you have any parting words or final thoughts as we conclude this interview?
Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. If you want it, you can do it. This is a great country. In spite of all the things that are bad, okay, if you really think about it, this is a great country with great opportunity. I say that in my book about my own self. And the fact that my siblings, they've all done well. I have a brother who is a law professor at University of Seattle, okay? And so I believe that the country has so much to offer, but you have to go get it. You have to be a go-getter. You can't wait for it, and you have to take it. And I want, as us, especially as underrepresented Latinos, I want us to not be humble and shy and respect authority to the point that it doesn't allow us to move. I want us to say, look, we need to be a little bit more aggressive on this thing. And it's interesting that, you know this, you see the difference between, for example, the culture that we as Mexicans grow up with versus, let's say, the culture of the Cubans who came as educated people. Cubans came as educated people. We as Mexicans come as workers, okay? And so you have to say, look, I'm going to pick up that confidence and I'm going to say I belong and I'm going to show it, okay? And you know, we have to be more Cuban-like in that way. But in other ways, we as Mexicans are perfect, okay?
You know, just so you know, I grew up with my mom talking about las labores, las labores and stuff. And so there's a lot of pride in me to present this interview to my audience. And I just can't tell you how happy I am that you've agreed. I'm going to enter my 23rd year of teaching high school. I'm going to go to Pasadena this year. I'm going to continue to point at you. I'm going to continue to show you as the example to my kids. I don't want to hear excuses. This guy did it from humble beginnings. This guy did it. You can do it too. You know?
That's right. That's good.
I eagerly await your book. I eagerly await your book.
My mother from Chihuahua was the proudest woman in the world. I mean, she was just pride, and she overflowed with pride.
Absolutely.
And fun.
Absolutely.
And that was a great model for us.
Awesome. Dr. Tapia, thank you. You've been so gracious with your time. I just want to say I appreciate you and I wish you the best, and farewell. Farewell.
I enjoyed it very much, and I think you have a very important message. Okay.
Thank you. Wow, what a treat. Dr. Tapia. Like I say, I've been such a long time admirer of him. I just feel so honored that he graciously gave his time to share such a wonderful, important, and unique perspective. I really enjoyed that. And if you enjoy this sort of material, please take a moment, hit that subscription button and the notification bell, smash that like button, and make a comment below. My name is Saul Cantu, and this is Texas Math Mundo. Farewell.